So for me, I was interested in portrayal of children with intellectual disabilities in the media, because I know that the media, when we talk about television, radio, and newspapers, can play a very important role in influencing the attitudes of the society. And this can also in turn influence the inclusion of learners with intellectual disabilities. And then when we talk about intellectual disabilities, I mean the disability that people are born with. This include Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, autism. It is also known as learning disability and also developmental disability. So I was looking at that particular disability. So, and when we talk about inclusion, it is a radical idea that advocates for full participation of members in education. A long time ago, we saw there were special schools for children with disabilities. And then we had integration, whereby we have children without disabilities in their classroom. And then we have just a single classroom at the corner, maybe at the fence, for children with intellectual disabilities. But now we have a new paradigm shift, which is inclusive education, whereby we say children without disabilities and children with disabilities should go to the same class, so that we can have an inclusive society right from the school. Because even when they go to special school, we don't have special universities and we don't have special work for persons with disabilities. So that's how the idea of inclusion came about. Then there are so many policies that support inclusion of children with disabilities. There's the United Nations Convention's Rights for Persons with Disabilities. There's Education for All. There's Individuals with Disabilities Act. All these acts and policies and laws, they promote a whole school approaches to inclusion. In Kenya, we also have the Education Act 2013. We have the Kenya Constitution 2010, Special Needs Education Policy, Persons with Disability Act 2003, and also we have Vision 2030. So we are saying we don't have policies that support inclusive education. They are there, but are they being implemented? And we have so many. So international policies are there. Kenya has ratified. Kenya has also made their own policies that support inclusive education. But do we have inclusive education in Kenya? So many persons with disabilities in Africa, they struggle. They don't, many of them have no access to education. So approximately 98% of children with disabilities in developing countries do not go to school. And also enrollment differ. For children with intellectual disabilities, their enrollment are so low, and they face exclusion and stigma, especially in school. And this is according to the Global Education for All 2016 research. So for me, the problem that I'm really looking at is at this idea of inclusion. It presents a paradigm shift in education in Kenya, even in the world. And the idea is backed by global, regional, and local policies. You've seen them the way I've explained. But for inclusion to succeed, it requires a concerted effort of all agencies of change, including media. When we talk about agencies of change, media plays a very critical, important role in change. So a well-sensitized media has a potential to change the way the society treats learners with intellectual disability. And television plays a central position in social construction of disability in the society, because television has the visual impact. And studies have been done, but studies have failed to link media, disability, and inclusive education. So an example of research has been done, it's by Agan, that has just been done on disability and media, but not inclusive education. So hence this study of mine, it will examine television framing in mainstreaming inclusion of learners with intellectual disabilities in schools in Kenya. So this paper, particular one that I'm presenting, was informed by framing theory. And we know all of us in media, framing involves selecting of pieces of information and organizing them to produce stories for an audience. So how we frame our stories, especially stories of children with disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and inclusive education, determines a lot the mainstreaming of disability and inclusive education in our society. So, and the research methodology, the paper was founded on the premise of desktop research. So I was reviewing papers that have been done on media, mass media and disability, television and disability, television and inclusive education. And then the data was captured, was general literature. And then I just narrowed down to 10 papers, which I reviewed. So the findings that I found that uncoordinated communication activities among key stakeholders in inclusive education sector without using media. So there are various efforts being done about inclusive education, but media is not involved. And then there's lack of public awareness and national education policies. I know so many people, when they hear about inclusive education, they are wondering, what is that? Because they will lack enough awareness about policies that exist. And even so many people, when they talk about inclusive education, they will tell you, oh, we are inclusive. But when you go to their school, you just find the integrated classroom whereby there's just one class. And even the students in the other classroom, they say, Ioni, that is a class for mad people, in quotes, because they don't interact with them. So those are integrated, but we are calling for a wholesome education where children should be in the same class. And then we have unsynchronized communication strategies from the education ministry, from the organizations that work with persons with disabilities. There's also lack of capacity, lack of awareness I've talked about, and there's also lack of partnership and knowledge for inclusive education is the main hindrance for effective public communication for social inclusion. So those were my findings. And some of my conclusions were effective media advocacy can propel the right community or family empowerment, public awareness, attitudes and behavior for all inclusive education. I also concluded that the umbrella body in Kenya, which is the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, should spearhead capacity building for journalists to develop higher professional standards in reporting disability matters so that they can amplify the voices of disability and thereby in encouraging inclusive education. When journalists start reporting on disability, especially inclusive education and children with intellectual disability, when they give it prominence, then we'll see perception and the narrative changing. And also organizations of persons with disability should hold annual award ceremonies to journalists covering disability issues, and that will motivate them to produce stories on persons with disabilities and children with intellectual disabilities. So my recommendation is media should raise awareness on the issues that surround inclusive education. And there also media can highlight what is being done to support teachers to include students with diverse needs in the classroom. Another recommendation was the urgent need to more disability equality training for all media employees to increase media coverage of stories on inclusive education. And also the media can raise awareness on the laws and policies on disability that exist. And organizations for persons with disabilities can hold seminars, conferences to train journalists interested in covering stories on inclusive education. Because with lack of training, with lack of understanding, I don't think much can be done. So that's the end of my paper. Thank you so much. Back to you, Judy.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. I like the fact that it's a research paper, but it's so simplified and it's very easy for all of us to understand. But a lot of insights, of course, come out of the presentation that you've made. And one of the interesting things, or one of the key things that we see, is the weak link between the duty bearers, that is the implementers of the policies and the law that we have in place, to recognize or to address the plight of mentally children who have intellectual instability. But one of the things that I would like to ask you, Jacqueline, for example, is how comes the media is not interested, or the media has not prioritized, the reporting of, children who have intellectual disability? Yet we've seen a lot of coverage when we talk about generally people with disabilities. How can you talk about how the media can be included to also identify, even if we talk generally about people with disabilities, how then do we also identify this with special needs under the same groupings? What can be done when you look at the role of the media in relation to that?
Okay, thank you so much, Judy. And I would just like to point out that media has not really covered disability issues. According to the many research that has been done, media has not covered disability issues. We only talk about disability during the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, like 3rd December. So there were so many stories about disability. But in essence, when you look at the reports, media doesn't really cover about disability. But there are so many challenges that make journalists not to cover disability issues. One is lack of training. You will agree with me, you didn't do any topic on disability reporting in your university, in your college, anywhere, there's no training. So the reporting that we do in disability is just according to what we imagine, what is disability, what is perception. But we really need maybe to start implementing reporting disability as a unit in our universities, or media organizations like AMWIC, like MCK, like Kenya Editors Guild should have specialized training on reporting disability so that we can have more journalists understanding how do we use the right terminologies, how do we call children with intellectual disabilities, because language plays a very important role, and even if we use the wrong language and we are reporting, still we are discriminating persons with disabilities and misrepresenting them. So the problem is lack of training, media houses' lack of having resources for journalists to cover disability stories because maybe they think they are boring stories. And also us as journalists, how many times do you cover a disability story? Because you don't really identify with disability, you think, oh, person with disability are just there, I don't have a disability, so I don't really need to cover disability. And that is something which is wrong, because disability is a club that you can join any other time. So we better start preparing on disability. You can also even get a child with intellectual disability. So if you don't report about it now, who will do? So for me, I think we still have a problem with media and disability reporting.
Thank you very much. Jacqueline, I totally agree with you that training of journalists is key, considering that most of us, when we went through our training, we were just told on how to record, how to do the interviews, but most of us were never prepared really on how to deal with the special groups of people, including the kind of language, the kind of the questions that we frame when we ask, victims and people involved in these special groups. So I think training is very important. And one of the things that I would really like to ask you, for example, what is the role of the stakeholders? There's civil society organizations, the NGOs that are dealing with the special groups such as, children with intellectual disabilities. What is your role in terms of getting the media to be interested? One of the things, of course, is the training, but then how do you attract them to come? What are some of the ways that you can suggest that we can do, especially even after this that you've spoken about it, considering that I'm at the Association of Media Women in Kenya, and I think, yes, this is an important area for us to do. So what do you think is your role, and how can you interest the media or us to start prioritizing the coverage of such special groups of people?
Okay, thank you so much for your question. So currently I'm working on reporting disability in Sub-Saharan Africa, and I would like to answer this question using the Tanzania example. So in Tanzania, when I started talking to journalists, we sponsor journalists and we also work with the Organization for Persons with Disabilities. The organization told us they lack also capacity. They don't have skills to engage in media. And even when we started doing so many stories on disability, and the organization were wondering, oh, so even we can be covered. Because they have been discriminated and alienated for a very long time, they think they don't even have a space in the media. So citing from the Tanzanian example, I think our organization, they also lack skills in engaging the media, and also they have funding, but the funding they have maybe is just for programs. They don't have funds for the media. But if the media organizations can reach out to those disability organizations, maybe they can partner together and they have something like training. And also I proposed, just like when we started reporting HIV and health sports, we have like annual sports awards. We used to have health awards. When you have awards, even journalists will be motivated to report on the issue because they know at the end of the day, someone is going to recognize. So even if when we work together, like the media houses, the Media Association and Organization for Persons with Disabilities, and then our aim will be to train and capacity build our journalists, I think we can change the narrative of disability in the media, hence the society, because media is the mirror of the society.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. I'll now open the floor. I can see Chinwe's hand is already up. Chinwe, if you don't mind, I'll take two questions before we move to the next presenter. So Chinwe, kindly, you can switch on your microphone and your video so that you can ask the question to Jacqueline.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, Dr. Chu, I'm speaking from Nigeria. Yeah, I appreciate this presentation. It's so wonderful. In fact, this reminds me that right from my undergraduate level till my PhD, I was never exposed to anything that has to do with disability reporting. That's quite unfortunate. Yeah, but I also have an understanding that in Nigeria, there is what is called special education for the disability. And that is only done in College of Educations, where people are trained to communicate with the disability. Yeah, I see that there is a gap between the media and disability reportage. But then when she was presenting, I looked at inclusiveness from the point of view of where the disabled are educated. And then I was prompted to contribute that this research can be extended by involving the stakeholders like policymakers, while the media is struggling to have to give attention to disability reporting, that the policymakers should make a special provision for training of the disabled. Because when we're talking about disability here, we have variety of disabled people. And if the media wishes to cover up all the angles, there needs to be special education for even the disabled, so that while the media is struggling to cover up, there will be diversification even in the media profession, so that while I am covering the disabled in one area, another person is covering in the other area, so that they will be carried along in the society. But then there is serious need for the media across Africa to include disability reporting, something like that. Anyway, I hope you understand me, so that we are trained to talk to those who are less privileged and help them to also voice out to the society. I so much appreciate this research report. Thank you very much.
Very much for your comment and also the suggestion. Jacqueline, I don't know whether you'd like to say something about it.
Yeah, also for me, I also appreciate, because from her presentation, I've also just gotten an eye-opener about policies. As much as we are talking about the media, I'm also thinking, right, yeah, the policy makers and the implementers, where are they? And then when we talk about special education for Kenya, we can say we have made maybe a step ahead, because right now, any teacher that is going to any local training college in Kenya, they are being now taught on special education. So special education is compulsory. But a long time ago, special education was just for Kenya Institute of Special Education and Kenyatta University. But right now, all our teachers are being taught on special education, so that when they go to classroom, they can be able to handle children with disabilities and those without disabilities. So I think that is a very right direction for the Kenyan government. And if it succeeds, then maybe the idea of inclusion is going to be possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I still have one more chance for one more question, but I can just look at the chat. People are really happy with your presentation. And in fact, we have a journalist who went through training, and I know training really works magic, especially when journalists are given presentations or given a background or the context like the way you've done. I realize that it's through the media that we can be able to amplify the voice of those who do not have that chance or the power to call a press conference and say this is happening to them. These are not the kind of people that you say these are members of parliament or government who have the power to call the media. So the media basically are the eyes, they are the voices who can be able to represent them. And so we can see this integral role of the media has to be strengthened. And I envisage a scenario where we can have a networking event where such presentations can be made. And, you know, ensuring that they are educated, and considering also media face a lot of challenges, including coverage of so many different issues at the same time. So thank you very much, Jacqueline. I don't know if there's anybody else who has a question before we move to the next presenter. Yes, there's a question from Stella Musimwa. How integrated are people with disability in the media, in the newsrooms? Not saying that they will be the ones reporting on disability, but that it is a reflection of how inclusive media fraternity is in the first place. Stella, thank you very much for asking that. One of the things that we've been saying is for the media to self-examine ourselves. When you talk about violations, when you talk about inclusivity, how inclusive are we in the management of the media? For example, how many women are at the decision-making table as editors or managing editors in the newsrooms? When you talk about other underrepresented groups, how many people in Kenya with special needs, whether people with disabilities, are at the decision-making table so that they can be able to prioritize some of these things? So yes, we are the media looking outside, but also we need to ask ourselves internally, are we respecting or are we amplifying or are we not the ones leading by example? So it's very good to always examine ourselves as the media. I know a lot of questioning is going within, and I can tell you from Amwick where I sit, we've been really pushing for some of the policies. Some of them include having more women at the decision-making table as editors to be able, to prioritize how news is covered, how women are covered. And so I think, Stella, I've answered you, and this is a debate that we should continue having, and having an honest conversation where so the media can be told you've not done right, or this is where you need to write. And I keep on saying the media is always very busy reporting about other people's issues, but the media do not self-examine itself. So thank you very much for that question, Musimwa. And her question actually links us to the next presentation, which is a paper that was done by Nancy Marangu and Dr. Rhoda Ansah. The paper is on exclusion for women with disabilities. As much as yes, we look at some of these groups together, it will be very good already considering that when you talk about women are alienated from the socio, political, and economic spheres of our society, and in so many diverse ways. And so it will be very interesting to hear what Nancy and Dr. Rhoda have prepared to see how these further violations are even further carried to other women also with the special needs. So Nancy and Rhoda, I don't know who's going to do the presentation, but the floor is now yours.
Nancy, please go ahead and do the presentation.
You're on mute.
Sorry, hey, do I share the screen or you have the presentation?
No, you can share the screen.
All right, let me get it.
Okay, thank you. So for our participants, please, you can be noting down your questions. We'll have another round of Q&A once all the presenters are done. So don't lose your cool, just keep them coming. Also, we have the chat, you can make use of it. Continue typing your questions, your comments, so that also we are able, to show that actually we have we are getting or we are gaining from what is being presented, and at the same time also we can be able to offer solutions or even contribute to the discussion. So Nancy, you have 14 minutes to do the presentation.
Thank you very much. I will take us through our presentation. Let me just make it. So by way of introduction, we are looking at the way women are excluded from getting news. We are trying to find out how accessible are our news channels here in Kenya. So by way of introduction, we said that the plight of persons with disabilities and communication dissemination remains unaddressed because number one, we lack information that is translated in other readable formats, and number two, we lack evidence-based research to address the current number of women with disability, especially within the media sector in Kenya. And secondly, in the developing countries, women with disabilities remain also uninformed. So it's not only a Kenyan problem due to lack of inclusive reporting standards. Judie and Jackie, you've already mentioned this, meaning that me being the third person mentioning it says something needs to be done. Then this creates loopholes for objective dissemination and independent reporting, because if I have no standard, like let's say Nancy TV, I will say I'll only provide the services of a sign language interpreter. Why? Because it's within the provision of the Constitution of Kenya, Article 54. Then the African Union Disability Inclusion Guide recommends the way information needs to be translated. I don't know how many of us have had the opportunity to interact with that guideline. It makes it very clear on what as news reporters need to do in terms of information dissemination. And we have to look at the situation. What is there at hand? We have the National Councils of Persons with Disabilities here in Kenya, and we have to appreciate that they exist. But do we work with them as journalists? Do we work with them as policymakers? Do we work with them as we disseminate our information? That is a rhetorical question. Then again, here in Kenya, we have at least inclusive reporting, because Article 54 of the Kenyan Constitution makes it mandatory that sign language, Braille, and other appropriate modes of communication needs to be made available. At least in our TV stations, we try to do that, which is a plus for all of us. However, despite that, even the provision of the Constitution, again, there is also Article 10, part 2, and there is also Article 19 to 23 that talks about the rights of persons with disabilities. I don't know how many of us have interacted with these articles. Number one, as Kenyan citizens. Number two, as news reporters, we are championing for inclusion. Not just even now, the women bit aside. Do our even children, do they access the information that we give them? Food for thought. Then again, in Kenya, we have the Kenya Acts, the Disability Act, that is number 14 of 2003, and the Kenya Sign Language Bill of 2021. All these laws have been put in place for us, but as media practitioners, what do we have to show that this is what we do deliberately to foster inclusion? For example, who can raise their hand and tell me they've ever seen a website of a broadcasting station that is inclusive? Who can raise their hand and tell me they've seen a Braille newspaper in Kenya? A rhetorical question. Moving on to next, we also appreciate that we have our Media Council of Kenya. Judie, I don't want to repeat that because you already touched on it. A lot needs to be done. We must agree, we have a challenge. We must join our hands together and ensure that we are not inclusive on policy. We are inclusive in our actions. But what can we say are the challenges of inclusive reporting? Number one, it's all about reporting. How do we report our findings? Do we know where these women are? Do we have data? When is research? When was research last carried out to tell us these are the number of women with disabilities in County X, and this is the news channel that they use to access information? Do we have that data? Good question. Then we also have lack of inclusive social media news platforms. Where is an accessible website for any media house in Kenya? Then we also have the lack of basic ICT skills. Most persons with disabilities, the digital divide is huge. We must accept it is there. But the big question is, what are we doing and what can we do together? So for this research, we decided to carry out a survey to find out how do our women with disabilities access news. We got 40 people who answered the online survey, and the gender was 50-50, 20 male and 20 female. And some of the channels that were identified as most famous for accessing news items, there was TV, of course, we can say, because there's a sign language interpreter. Then there is radio, we can say. There is, it's available in local dialect. So for example, if someone is blind, they can hear. When we come to social media, yes, there are those who use social media, but do they just go on Facebook to get the news? Are they able to access the news, or what is there for them? When we sought to find out whether we have newspapers that are translated into Braille, out of the 37 people who responded, they said, no, we don't have one. And if anyone has seen one, please, I will be happy to see it. And when we asked if all our TV stations have a sign language interpreter, yes, people said, at least it is on the Constitution, and the Communications Authority of Kenya have made sure it is enforced. And what did we recommend, or what did the people recommend? That we need to have policy and guidelines within the media industry that says, this is what inclusive reporting is. This is how our women will access their news. And secondly, someone asked a question about the employment rate of women or persons with disabilities. That was the other recommendation that came up. What does this mean? We have to make our sector zealously and zealously inclusive. Meaning, we have to start thinking about how is that journalism PR course structured at Daystar University, at the University of Nairobi? How can it accommodate the person who is blind, the learner who is deaf? We as practitioners in the industry, we need to go back to the drawing board and ask, what is the future of our children, of our nieces, of our cousins who are behind us, who would love to pursue this career, yet they are persons with a disability? And what we recommend for us from policy to action, number one, persons with disabilities, women, men, everyone needs to be able to access a news channel. And the first thing is to have an assistive device. It could be an accessible website. It could be making available the cell phones that are disability friendly, and provision of hearing aid for those who are deaf. Number two, I will not delve again into the issue of policy. All of us have said we have very good policies, but now our implementation is what all of us need to rethink what to do. Thirdly, and Jackie spoke about this capacity building, there is a huge difference between the person who lives in Nairobi town and the person who lives in Meru County, Mashinani, about the well-done policy that was launched during the Persons with Disability Day at KICC. They just probably just saw. But you who knows what is there, are you willing to take some time to go and bring the women together and tell them this is what is happening? And conclusively, we would like to say that inclusive reporting and equal access to news item is one gateway of reducing rural poverty. It's only an informed populace that can be able to contribute to the GDP of the country. Information is power. Also, we need to reconsider our reporting channel. Judie has already mentioned that, and Jackie also emphasized. I will not want to repeat that again. And thirdly, as media practitioners, we must be deliberate to mentor and nurture young men and women with disabilities who will take over the newsrooms for us, because we have to foresee a generation that is able, because God has given us the opportunity and the platform to make it possible for them. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much, Nancy and Rhoda. Please start the presentation. As a journalist, I can tell you I'm itching, I'm just finding that already these are very good stories. And I'm thinking, wow, where are the contacts of Nancy, Rhoda, Jackline? Because as a journalist, sometimes when we sit through these forums is when we can be able to see the story that we don't see every day. Life is moving very fast. Unless you come to forums such as this one, then that's when we are now able to pick on stories that we haven't done before. And for the journalists in this forum, I hope once you attend these forums, you can really see some of these things. And of course, we have that role to play. And the role that we play, I'll keep on saying, sometimes I can write a story. It looks like a drop of water in the ocean. But when I put my drop together with the drop of Topista, I put it together with the drop of Anne Mikia, of Rhoda, and Nancy, and all the rest. These drops, when put together, they have a force. And it is these drops that create the ocean. And that is why I believe every effort from each one of us can lead, to something, whether it's, creating awareness or whether it's making the duty bearers and those with the responsibility to be able to see the things that they don't see, because it's through the reporting and you can see the emphasis on the role of the media. The emphasis is on the media to talk about these things, to start promoting the discourses, to start bringing these special voices or these underrepresented voices to our shows so that people can hear the kind of challenges that they go through and why it is important to include them. Actually, I never thought about it before, only that when Nancy has made the presentation, I've just remembered, actually, speaking of it, we only see the sign interpreters. What about the people who, need to read the newspaper? And then there's a danger of relying on secondary sources of information. They too want to hear it firsthand. They don't want to be told this is what they said. They also want to read it firsthand, because the danger of interpreting information through a third party, a lot of information gets lost along the way. So it will be very good if we can reach to a place where the media can be our voice, where the media can be our watchdog and speak on behalf of the special groups of people. One of the things that I want to ask you, Rhoda and Nancy, it's what have you so far done, for example, to reach out to the media? Have you been involved in any forms of trainings, or have you done, made any efforts, for example, to reach out to the media sector working group? For example, in Kenya, we have something we call the Kenya Media Sector Working Group. Every year, they have an annual conference where different groups come in. How have you utilized the available spaces to ensure that you can involve them? Because one of the things, I'm sorry to say, the media will look like people who are really experienced, people who are really informed. But for some reason, sometimes we are so ignorant of those things that we think they're small, but these are very big things. So what efforts have you done to reach out, for example, to the Editors Guild or to the Kenya Media Sector Working Group, or even in other different countries? It will be very interesting to hear how you've involved them to ensure that this story is being heard from you to them.
Thank you so much, Judy, for the question. So as a background, I'm Ghanaian, but I currently live in Canada. So Nancy can specifically speak in regards to how the media is being reached out to in relation to our research. But specifically as it relates to my country, Canada, that I'm living, my research pioneers disability issues within the construction industry and within the media. And one of the things that I have been doing for the past 2 years is to do regular workshops. So I have links up with different organizations that are very prominent when it comes to representing specific groups within Canada, and really sending them proposals about doing regular workshops that are open to the public, where they can come in, we have good discourses in terms of not only understanding how they access the media and but then how from the back end, things can be put in place in order to make sure that it's as inclusive as possible. Those forums have been really helpful, especially in people that usually don't have the voice to really voice on, because these are 1, 2, 3 policies that this is how we perceive it versus how we implement it. So that has really been really crucial for us here. But I'm sure Nancy specifically can speak to how that is done specifically as relates to Kenya.
Yes, Nancy, and even when you speak about it, for example, in the Kenyan space, how do you think we can also be able to share our experiences or even borrow lessons also from the rest of the countries in Africa? Yes, Nancy.
Thank you very much, Judy, for your question. To be honest with you, I have been trying to communicate for climate change. That has been my key area of interest. But what you're telling me today is that I need to do my homework again. I need to take this study, break it down, and work with it, the recommendations to specific people. You've pointed out the guilt, and I'll be happy to collaborate with you because you could be more informed about them than I am, to be very honest. Secondly, for me, about inclusion, this is an area I have found passion of just from policy, reading different policies and asking myself, why do we have this many policies, yet nothing? Therefore, I am also growing in the sector. And I am happy that you've brought this recommendation to me, is that I will collaborate with you if you welcome us to be sure that this information gets out to the media here in Kenya.
Nancy, I can assure you, yes, I'll be more than happy to do that through Association of Media Women in Kenya. I also see several journalists here, and we are more than happy to work and also introduce you to the right forum, because one of the things for us, especially us in the CSO, is always to ensure that there's media engagement, and the media engagement starts with identifying how the media works, the landscape, and also empowering the CSOs for them to know what opportunities are there for them, because without talking about it, and I see a comment from Jackline, and Jackline says last week she had a training with editors in Naivasha here in Kenya, and they were shocked on the injustice they have been doing for persons with disabilities. We hope we are going to see the growth in representation of disability in the media. I keep on saying sometimes when you sit in the newsroom, especially as an editor, when you meet different groups of people, you hear information that shocks you, information that never thought happens. And like today, we were talking about a survivor of GBV, and she gave her personal story, how she went to report a case of GBV and she was raped by the police. She went to the officer, she was also raped. And so it's shocking to us. So until we engage the media, we tell them this is what is happening. We put the emphasis on the subjects. We put the emphasis on the people who are affected by these situations. Then they hear it for themselves. That is when the media gets shocked and feels guilty that actually enough attention has not been paid to recognize and ensure there's inclusivity, not of just a few people who have the power to call press conferences, not just the few people who have the ability to send press conferences, but actually that there are those voices that never get to call that press conference, that they don't have the power to send the press releases. So I can assure you that we are going to work together, and this is one of also the recommendations that the CSOs that are represented here, the different organizations, that you can work together to ensure that this is not just a discussion, but actually there is an action that will follow after this, that we are going to have an editorial meeting, and will inform AWIM that we have a meeting between the different people, the special representing organizations with different needs, and that this is as an outcome of this conference that we're having today. Let me just read another comment before we go to our next presentation. It's from Chinwe. I'm so interested in this panel research concept and focus, and will be willing to collaborate with fellow women to extend this to Nigerian environment. Can I have access to the PowerPoint email address? Yes, it is there. I am sure Odera here, she's read your message and she'll be able to link us up, because this is not just for talking, but it's also a platform for us to be able, to even network and get to know each other and exchange our experiences. So is there anyone else who has a question to ask before we move to the next panel?
Thank you, Judy, for that. I'll be happy to be in touch with you to see how we can actually reach out to the media in regard to this, and also probably learn more about the best practices that are being done in other countries, so that when we are disseminating this information here in Kenya, we are able to give the best to our very own.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Rhoda. I'm sure we'll have a follow-up after this. And so we've heard about Kenya and Canada, and now would like to hear from Dina Farouk Zaid. Dina is the Dean of Media Sciences Faculty at IAEMS and Professor at Mass Communication Department, Faculty of Arts, Ain Shams University in Egypt. Dina will be talking about the challenges of Egyptian women journalists during COVID-19. Like we know, women, as usual, especially female journalists, already face unique challenges in the newsrooms, apart from challenges of career progression and motherhood. The issue of changing our biological us from being a girl to becoming a woman in the newsroom, and the kind of challenges that we face, and that we are, blocked from rising to the decision-making table at the newsroom. And now COVID-19, the pandemic, presented even harder challenges for the women. So Dina, welcome. The floor is yours. Kindly share with us your presentation, and you have 15 minutes to do that.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me first share my screen.
So as she gets her presentation, you can be posting your comments on the chat or your questions.
Can you see my screen right now?
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Dina Farouk Abu Zaid, professor at Mass Communication Department, Faculty of Arts at Ain Shams University in Egypt. It's one of the public universities in Egypt. And I'm the Dean of Media Sciences Faculty at International Academy of Engineering and Media Science. It's one of the private universities in Egypt. First of all, I would like to thank all of the organizers of the conference for giving me this opportunity to be with you in this distinguished conference. And I hope we can meet next year, but face to face. I'm going to talk today about the challenges of Egyptian women journalists during COVID-19. Women journalists in Egypt work with great numbers in public and private media and in traditional and new media. Also, females in faculties and departments of mass media and mass communication are always found with great numbers as students or professors. Women journalists face different challenges associated with Egyptian and Arab culture, traditions, norms, social and financial problems, besides stereotypes about women in general and about women who are working in the media in particular. And in these last years, COVID-19 has been adding more challenges that women in media should deal with. To examine these challenges of Egyptian women journalists during COVID-19, I conducted a survey of 200 female journalists in Egypt who work in traditional media and new media. Concerning the findings showed that COVID-19 has decreased the readership and distribution of printed newspapers, which have been declining before COVID-19. During lockdown, journalists depended on the internet, cell phones applications, and social media to cover events, publish news, reach and find sources of information and people to interview. The majority of women journalists in the sample need to develop their technological skills to be more professional in dealing with digital media. Many of women journalists didn't study computer skills. They learned through practice or through the internet by searching on Google. Few female journalists have studied digital media at universities. They are the ones who have graduated in these last years. So the courses they have taken include the new technologies in the field. The older female journalists had studied courses that contain information and skills related to traditional media. Citizen journalism is very popular, but maybe the popularity is found more in new media comparing to traditional media. Online journalism and television use normal citizens' videos, posts, and tweets as sources of information and sources of news. Also during COVID-19, the normal citizens' experiences with the lockdown or when they were sick are used by the media, especially new media. So traditional media journalists should encourage audiences to interact with the media and should encourage citizen journalism. Female journalists are afraid from face-to-face communication while covering news due to the spread of coronavirus. To cover many events and news, they have to go out and meet or interview many individuals, and to stay indoors in closed areas or crowded areas, which increase the risk of being infected with COVID-19. Making vaccines available in media institutions should be a priority all over the world. Also, PCR tests should be for free for journalists because it's very expensive nowadays, if I will talk about Egypt, for example. And the distinguished medical insurance is important to be offered to journalists to cover all the expenses of COVID-19 treatment. And this is, of course, my recommendation, not only for female journalists, but all the journalists, males and females. Infodemic is a major issue during COVID-19. Female journalists and audiences are being exposed to a huge amount of information and news about the virus. And sometimes these information and news are contradicting each other, are without sources, or very hard to check their credibility and trustworthiness. Journalists should deal with a huge amount of information and need to compete with a huge amount of news to be able to capture the attention of the audiences, but at the same time should provide the audiences with correct and credible information. Also, being faster than any other journalist or media is very hard, especially if the news is about COVID-19, and this is due to the infodemic. Egyptian women journalists should be offered free technologies, including software, cell phones applications, and internet networks, especially during coronavirus, due to the increased demand and dependency on these technologies to decrease face-to-face communication and to avoid crowded places. It's very rare to find female journalists in health and science journalism and health and science communication. It's important to encourage female journalists to work in health and science communication and journalism, especially after coronavirus widespread in the world, which has led to the increase of coverage of health news. Also, it's important to encourage girls and women to work from home, especially during coronavirus or COVID-19. Media institutions should give them the permission and should give this opportunity if they ask for. Media institutions should provide all the facilities to help girls and women journalists to work from home. At the end, thank you so much for listening, and I hope we can meet next year, but face to face in a world without coronavirus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think everybody just wants to leave home and then we can meet, and you know, there's a lot of things when we don't meet physically. Let's pray that by next year at such a time that we'll be able to meet each other face to face and talk. You know, there's all the difference other than when you just meet online. Thank you very much for that presentation. I think it opens, you know, our eyes to see other challenges, and looking at countries. Of course, the challenges have been different. And for example, if we can compare to what happened, considering that in your country, I don't know whether journalists lost jobs. In Kenya, what was happening was there were massive job losses, a lot of pay cuts, and women were the first culprits. Women were told, hey, you are married, or you look like you'll get married, so it's okay, we can give you a pay cut, or you look like you'll be pregnant, so we can fire you. So how did the pandemic affect the female journalists, especially when the media houses had to take those, you know, aggressive measures to try and, you know, address the revenue shortage around the media houses? how did they become victims of the pay cuts and the loss of jobs? It will be interesting to hear what happened in Egypt, and also other people from other different countries. It will be very interesting to hear how female journalists were affected by the pandemic, and if they were again subjected to those weird ways of determining who should get a pay cut or who should be fired. Yes, Dina.
Okay. As I said before during my presentation, that we have a great number of students, of female students in mass communication departments and in mass communication faculties. Also in mass media and mass communication institutions, you can find many female journalists working. So the problem here is that they face many challenges related to the society norms, traditions, culture, but concerning the numbers, it's not a big problem. So, for example, if I'm a media institution and I need to hire, it's of course very easy to find female journalists because, as I said, many graduates are females. So they don't prefer males comparing to females, and it's not a gender problem because we have a lot of females who are ready to work. So this is not a problem. Maybe the problem are the difficulties and the problems and the challenges that they face because of the gender. But to find a job, it's not the problem. To find a media institution, it's not a big problem. But maybe the problem is to find the good environment, to find many facilities while doing their work. And during COVID-19 in particular, there was, as I said, decline in the distribution of newspapers. There was a decrease in the coverage in the streets, and to go to the institutions, to media institutions, to be able to interview people face to face. During the lockdown, people most of the time were using new media and digital media and social media. So new media journalists, and especially if they are females, they were working, but maybe traditional media journalists, they were facing problems because they are not used to use the technologies. They are not used to include or to apply new media while working, to be able to find a source, to be able to do an interview online, or to be able to post or publish their news. So the main problem was how to use technology, and if this technology is available or not available for them, or if this technology is expensive for them to do their job. And some of them were not ready to learn new technologies or to learn new media and digital media, maybe because of their age. Older generations, they were not ready to learn these skills. And younger generations were accepting, and some of them, as I said, have learned these technologies and these skills while studying in mass communication departments and mass communication faculties.
Thank you very much for that, Dina. And one of the things, for example, reporting during infodemic, when we have too much information, and sometimes information that has the danger of developing fatigue, or stories becoming tired, because it's always reporting the statistics who are in the ICU, who have died, who are infected. So there was that kind of fatigue that was developed within the media. But how did the journalists, form creativity around it to ensure, for example, they were able to use the space that they have as female journalists, for example, to dispel some of the misinformation and disinformation? Because remember, we had incidences of people drinking sanitizers and passing on. Basically, there was too much information. Some of it was accurate, the rest of the information was not inaccurate, and the rest of it was not accurate. So how did the female journalists leverage on these hurdles, for example, to excel and, shine? Because I always believe in journalism, it's always for us to shine better than the others. That's when we become more renowned, and that's when our stories are even known better. So it will be very nice to hear what the Egyptian female journalists did to ensure that they were on top of the game when it came to correct the misinformation, disinformation, and sieving through that, a lot of information on COVID-19.
Concerning covering COVID-19 specifically, we can consider it categorized under health communication and health media and health journalism. And health journalism or health communication is characterized as a slow journalism. So it's very hard and it's very serious to publish or to post any news about health, about the vaccine, about the pandemic, without being sure of the credibility of all of the information and all of the sources. And I think this is considered the major or the most important challenge and problem that journalists in general face and female journalists in particular face. Maybe female journalists and even male journalists in Egypt, they are not interested a lot in health communication and in health journalism. But during COVID-19, most of them were, I don't want to say that they are forced, but it was a topic that they have to cover because all of the world and all of Egyptians were living during this environment, the COVID-19 and the coronavirus environment. So it was one of the most important news that all of the journalists and most of the journalists should cover. So during covering this coronavirus, they engage with health journalism and health communication. And they were not ready because they were not prepared. And they didn't take courses or specialized courses in how to deal with science information or to deal with health information. This was a problem. The second, as I told you, the slow journalism. Slow journalism means that I have to be sure 100% before writing anything about coronavirus or about the vaccine. And this was not available for all of the journalists. As I said, it was a competition. The infodemic was considered a severe competition between the journalists, males and females, because they have to publish news very fast, and at the same time they have to be sure of all of the information. And during lockdown, it was very hard to interview the sources and to interview the doctors and the professors or the people who are specialized in treating coronavirus or COVID-19. So it was very hard. And sometimes it was very hard for them to deal with certain news as truths, to find the sources and to get the main source of the information or the primary sources of information. It was very hard. Maybe this why many rumors and many gossips during the lockdown were found in the Egyptian media. Maybe it was less in traditional media because traditional media is very traditional even in their ethics and in their responsibilities, and they have social responsibility. So the traditional media in general were not interested in being the faster or to be the first one to publish the news, but they were it was important for them to write and to publish the true news and the true events about COVID-19. On the other hand, in new media and in digital media, journalists were interested about to be the first one to write the news and to post the news on social media or online journalism with all of its kinds and genres. So this was the problem, that many online journalists wrote many information that some of these information were wrong, were not credible. And this is one of the challenges of COVID-19 for males or female journalists.
You're actually right. It was a big challenge for so many journalists. But one thing that I kept on telling journalists is they have a role to play in terms of, being recognized for sending out credible information and helping the society with information that was factual to help them make, the right decisions about their safety, about their health. So thank you very much for sharing with us the Egyptian case. I believe we are really learning from each other and getting to hear that even the challenges that we face in different countries are not so different from each other. But to see that networking is what helps us even to look for ways of how we can even be better, especially when you're struggling, ensuring that the women are rising, the women are becoming the creative reporters, the women are becoming the managing editors, the women are becoming the editors, are becoming the voices of power and voices of authority that can report on issues and they can be trusted on. So thank you very much, Farouk, for that. And so I just look at the chat. There's a comment from Chinwe, and she says, friends and professional colleagues, I am so optimistic that we have great minds here. These issues are timely and relevant. Hope we believe in teamwork irrespective of physical distance. ICT is here to offer common ground for success. Thanks and remain blessed and focused. So thank you very much, Chinwe, for that comment. Yeah, so continue posting your questions, your comments on the chat. And now I'll move on to our next speaker. This is Belinda Nadine. She's a student at University of KwaZulu. Belinda will make a presentation about how music, protest music, was used in post-2000 Zimbabwe. And we can look at the role of the protest music to call for inclusivity, or when the society actually feels that they are sidelined or they are, alienated from the socio-political and economic lives of our country. So Belinda, the floor is yours. Belinda, are you here? Belinda, are you here? Irene. Yeah, so as we wait for Belinda to get ready with our presentation, I think it will be very good for us also to open the floor to the participants to discuss some of the ways that we can be able to ensure that there's inclusivity in the way we frame our news, the way we report our news. And it will be very interesting to hear from the participants, especially the journalists who are here. First, suggestions have been made, especially when we talk about, people with disability. And one of the recommendations that has been made is for us to diversify further, go beyond just having the sign language interpreters, to think about how do we create a space for Braille? What ideas can we share? What things that you think we can sit down and have a discussion with? And at the same time, how would you encourage the different representatives from the different organizations to be able to utilize or leverage of the media, especially beginning the conversation of ensuring inclusivity of the special groups? About gender and women representation generally, we've really been having a lot of active conversations around that. And even despite all these active conversations, we still have a long way to go. Women are still underreported, especially if we look at the coverage is, women considered at less than that 5% as sources of the news. Despite all this awareness, despite all this active reporting, we still have a long way to go. Now you can imagine, what about other special groups of people who do not get that attention? And now that you've heard it from them and some of the recommendations that have been made, what do you think will be the way forward? Where do we start from here? And I would like to hear from some of our participants here. I know we can see Anne here, Fatma is there. We have Pascalina, Chino already contributed, Kevin Sewe. Kindly let's hear your views about this. Also the panelists, feel free to make further recommendations, also from presentations that have been made by the rest of the panelists. Oh yeah, there's a comment from Stella Musimwa. Broadcast, particularly community radio, is a powerful tool for inclusivity of marginalized communities. I would like to hear how Kenya, Nigeria, in fact, anywhere else are faring in community radio. Zimbabwe just only got its community radio licensing started since independence 40 years ago. Thank you very much, Stella, for that. I think in Kenya, though I would really welcome somebody to talk about it as well, but in Kenya, we can talk, we've really gone far in terms of, having a community radio stations. In Kenya, we have over 200 radio stations. We have, I think, almost over close to 100 television stations. And also we have the local newspapers, but the newspapers are fewer. But out of these over 200 radio stations, majority of them are community radio stations. And actually the use of community media in Kenya has been very powerful when you talk about inclusivity, when you talk about social injustices, when you talk about the role of the media in, promoting peace and gender inclusivity. The community media, in fact, are the most accessible for us. These are the ones that even give us more airtime to talk about these issues. They have, feedback forums, and actually they have been very important when you talk about development, when you talk about stories with impact. Even when you look at the timing of the features, the timing is longer compared to the commercial media houses. And so actually there's been a lot of push and a lot of support towards the community media houses. And one of the things that has been done in Kenya through the Media Council of Kenya is to extend story grants and even funding to some of them in terms of special programs. And even we have organizations, NGOs and CSOs, including the government, who on purpose ensure that they support them through various programs. So in Kenya, I can say we have quite a big number, quite vibrant. And initially we had challenges. Challenges were that you could be a watchman and then you decide, wow, I can start a community media house. So initially we had challenges of ensuring that the people who work at these radio stations are trained, at least they have the skills and the knowledge. And with that basic training, we've seen a lot of improvement in terms of the content that is produced and in terms of the work that we've been doing. So a lot has really been done, and we keep on seeing so many of them coming every day. But I can tell you the biggest challenge is sustainability and the viability. There are a lot of challenges because you can get so much support from different players. The sustainability part of it, to ensure that they continue working and functioning every day, has been the biggest challenge. You already had some of them that have already closed down. And so I would say, yes, we are somewhere there, but we still have other teething challenges. And now I see a hand is up. Fatuma, kindly, it would be very nice to hear you speak about especially that question that has been raised. Karibu, Fatuma.
Thanks, Judy. I won't turn my camera on because I'm in a room full of people. And also my voice is a bit hoarse because I'm recovering from a cold. So hi, everyone. I'm really glad to see familiar faces, and I'm really glad to see that conversations like this are happening in our region. So I'm really happy and glad that the organizers could find this very rich panel to discuss this, and a very rich host, Judy, to conduct this particular session. I wanted to chip in on the community radio station bit, and for me, I'm seeing an opportunity for female journalists to actually cut a niche in the community radio stations. We keep talking about it being a bit challenging for female journalists to, to grow in mainstream media houses. I'm not saying that they shouldn't take the challenge by the horn and maybe try and fight for their place in the mainstream media houses, but I'm seeing a space in the community radio station where female journalists, where women in media can actually take foot and maybe the opportunity that is there to come up with programs that mostly focus on women. It can be political issues, especially now that we are heading into an election period. We are having female or women politicians coming out and wanting to vie for different positions, but then they lack the forum to actually talk about their manifestos, their dream for the country or the county or the constituency. So maybe there's a space in that community radio station where we can start nurturing women voices and give them a platform to even host a show. We can even have, a female politician coming into the studio hosting a show where they just listen to what the community wants, what the community needs at this particular time as we head into the elections. So that's the area that I'm looking at. The biggest problem also with the media ownership in the country is that we tend to have a lot of community radio stations, but then the owners of the community radio stations to a bigger percentage are politicians. So they're the ones who call the shots on those mainstream media houses or those radio stations that they own. So it's a bit even difficult to, say or air a program that is on contrary to the media owner. So it's a bit challenging. With community radio stations, sometimes you have that leverage, but also we see other politicians coming in and owning those community radio stations. So it's a bit difficult. The issue of sustainability, Judy, you've talked about it. But I'm glad that I've seen media development organizations coming up with media business opportunities where they try to look at how can community radio station leverage their social media reach. We find most of the community radio station have social media platforms, but then how do they monetize it so that they're able to create revenue from those audiences that follow them on Facebook, Twitter, and so on. So those are just my quick points that I wanted to comment on, Judy. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Fatma, for pointing it out as it is, because one of the things that actually we've witnessed is that the community media has an important role to play, but actually how engaged they are, especially in addressing societal needs. Like now, if we talk about, for example, an election, and now we can be looking at how women can be represented, or how women, like in Kenya now, we are seeing for the first time we have a lot of women running for political seats normally regarded as for men. And now the community media are the ones within the communities where they work to give that platform, for example, to the women in that area to talk about what are now the added, or what are the extraordinary challenges are they facing, even despite them coming out in big numbers. So if they cut, the niche for themselves, like Fatma is saying, actually the success is so high. And one of the case scenarios that I can give you about a community media house that had been shut because of talking about injustices in one of the slums, the community came out to defend the radio station, that even the government was unable to shut it down because the community believes in them and they trust them and they support them because they respond directly to the needs of communities that they work in. So the power of the community media cannot be underestimated. But one thing I know is that they really require a lot of support, considering that sometimes they're not able to compete at the same level, especially with the commercial media houses. And even with the communities they live in, if you look at the base, even if it's an advertisement, the people around there are not able to invest in a big way. So I think it's about creativity and looking for more sustainable ways, or diversifying ideas of how we can ensure that they can be able to sustain themselves, because they play a very key role within the communities. Thank you very much, Fatma, for that. Chinwe, I don't know whether you're able to share with us the case in Nigeria.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. Yes, I can only say little because I am not actually in the practical media environment. I am in an institution where media professionals are trained. But however, if I say that there are no community radios in Nigeria, I might be lying. But then in my own view, for there to exist a community radio or community media houses, the voices of the people should be appropriately heard, and it should be a participatory thing. So if I see a media house, maybe radio house, located in a community place, but being owned by a rich man who is a politician in the town, I would not say that that is community radio. I hope you understand my point, because ownership is a very big factor in media business. So in as much as we can claim that there are community radio houses here and there, of course, newspaper, I don't think I have come across any in Nigeria that is actually community for now. It existed in the past during the early times of the media in Nigeria. But today, I am yet to see a community newspaper that is functional. However, the impact of community radio in Nigeria has not totally been felt. Why? Because ownership has remained a very big challenge. He who pays the piper detects the tone. That has been it. All media houses in Nigeria, for me, are owned by the big power holders. And therefore, almost every media house dance to their tone. If the people's voices are not heard, it is not community. So I want to leave it hanging that way, because I am not an authority in that area, but the truth is around it. The truth is around what I have said. So that's the situation, and we're pleading that by God's grace, we will move ahead and get better things done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chinwe, for shedding light on that. At least we've been able to answer Stella. I hope the answers we've gotten are sufficient enough. So like you can hear, yes, the Kenyan case, we are a bit ahead, but we still have challenges. Nigeria, yes, they're somewhere there, but so it's not too late. Probably it's Stella, you're going to push this forward. I always believe somebody can start something for the case of Zimbabwe. So I don't know, Belinda, are you back or not? I don't think she's back. In case you're back, let me know. But now moving also forward, if we can go back and look at the other presentations that were made, and there's some recommendations that have been made, especially the request to ensure that the media houses or the media organizations are able to ensure that we diversify, so that also we can include people with special needs. You know, we've had about Braille, you know, we've had about so many different people with special needs. As the media, are we able to do that? Are we in a position to, you know, cater? Because all this, of course, come with the resources. But in what ways can we be able to address that? I would like to hear from the media representations that we have here. Dennis, Juma, Anne Mikia, Thomas, Buire, who else is from the media here? It will be very interesting to hear. Yes, I see Mikia's hand is up. Yes, Mikia. Yes, Mikia. Yes. Hi, Mikia.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you a bit faint, but we can hear you a bit. Just talk.
Okay. Wanting to talk about, you talked about people with disabilities. Citizen TV has a very nice program. Unfortunately, they air it at 10 p.m. I think on Thursdays. It's a very interesting program, and I thought that's unique. It features people with all manner of disabilities, showing that despite their disability, they are able to do their thing. They are able to pull their weight. They're able to do their own thing. The only problem is where they've hidden it. And I was wondering, why do they air it at night? I think it would be very interesting if they aired it during the day, because the target audience is likely to enjoy watching it if it's during the day. Regarding having space for women, there's something I have observed lately. There's a lot of the media, the stories that the media are covering today lack depth. And I think if they did very well, if they did programs that are detailed with, well, featuring women who have achieved and showing how they have achieved it, how they've made it, I think it will also be interesting to show that women make a contribution in the society. It doesn't matter whether it's in politics or in whatever field they are making a mark. I think there's still space for that. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say for now.
Thank you very much, Mikia. You're very right, especially when we tuck it in late in the night, when we don't have more, especially the targeted group even watching the television, and most people are asleep at 10. But I believe if we continue now having this discourse, if we continue talking about the network that we've discussed with the rest of the team, I think this is a debate we need to have forward, that we ensure that we are having this conversation, because the more we talk about it and even be able to raise some of these issues, I hope this panel that we have today is going to be a continuation, but after that we'll be able to have a forum where we can be able to invite the media to cover and also to hear some of the issues that have been raised, especially the issue that Mikia says, yes, the space has been given, but at what time has it been given? Does it really serve the interest of the people? Are the people that we are targeting even watching that television show at that? The second issue that Mikia raises, I think, which has been the biggest challenge with our reporting today, are the declining levels of professionalism, the declining seriousness that journalists attach the stories that they do. We see a bit of scratching the surface and leaving the things and moving to the next story. But I always keep on saying, for the journalists to stand out, especially for the women, you know that a lot of female journalists have to work so hard for them to get recognition, even for the journalists, especially even the community. For that to get recognized like the ones in the bigger media or like organizations, we really have to work hard a lot. And one of the things that I always believe is in analytical, more in-depth reporting that brings out issues, that talks about issues that are not usually discussed. And I think we have that responsibility to ensure that, you know, we are not just scratching the surface, but actually we are going in depth to bring out the underreported issues, the issues that are not tackled or discussed at all. So thank you very much, Mikia, for that. I had seen the hand of Dennis Juma. Dennis, it will be very interesting to hear after the training, how has it helped you in your work and what are you going to do now that you've had the concerns that have been raised about how the media prioritizes in terms of ensuring there's inclusivity in the way we report and the way we do our reports. Yes, Juma, are you there?
Yes, I think this is very interesting session. I really enjoyed the presentation and the fact that we are giving attention to this very pertinent subject at this point in time. And I just wanted to highlight that I'm a university lecturer. I've looked at curriculums for various institutions in the country, and there's no disability reporting. But currently at Muranga University, where I teach, I've been able to influence the curriculum. So we are the first university in Kenya right now, which is teaching disability reporting, which I think is very interesting. And I'm seeing many other universities having an interest. So soon enough, I think we'll have more institutions joining us and teaching disability reporting. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much, John Davula, to talk about that, because it will also be interesting to share this knowledge or share how you're doing it, because one of the things that we need to be pushing as the media is for specialization before even the students leave the university to enter the newsroom. I think we need to start prioritizing the coverage and reporting of these issues, because they require a kind of, special reporting that respects, the victims, the terminology, and even looking at why are we reporting on this. So thank you very much for sharing that information with us. And it will be very interesting. I think personally, I'll make a follow-up just to see what you're doing. It will be very interesting to see what you've done and how this can be shared across all other academic institutions that are doing journalism training. I have seen another hand. That's Jacqueline. Yes, Jacqueline.
Okay, thank you so much, Judy. You had talked about what the media houses is doing about disability reporting. I also wanted to point out, when I was at KBC, I started the first disability program. It's called Able Differently, and it airs, I think, prime time every Sunday. Every Sunday, 1 after news. I think that's during daytime, after lunchtime news, that program airs. But what I wanted also to let journalists who are in the room to know, disability reporting is not like, when we are talking about disability rights, it's a human rights issue. It's not health issue. And also when it is a human rights issue, when we are talking about disability reporting, we are not talking about tokenism. So it is something that you need to do so that you don't commit injustice to persons with disabilities. Just the way we were fighting for gender representation in the media, that's the way we need to do disability representation in the media. When you are interviewing someone, make sure you have a woman, you have a man, and then you have a person with disability. So in the talk shows, in agriculture programs, in politics, let's not just have persons with disabilities talking about their disabilities and their problems. When we have people with disabilities talking about politics, about education, we see them as scholars, then slowly we are going to change the narrative of disability in the media. So it's not a must they have a specific program on disability, but they can cover disability in a wholesome, and then we are going to change the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for that, because actually we are talking about inclusivity. So in our reporting, when you talk about matters of policy, we are going to interview people about, a representation or a policy review, but we are talking about people with disabilities, but we never even include them. We don't see them. How can we hear other people talking about them and we are not having them represented? And I think, yes, Jacqueline, as you pointed it out, we don't have to have a show for them to come and to us to talk about them, but basically is ensuring that we're involving them in our interviewing. The same way we are saying that we don't want just a panel composed or comprising only men. So how do we ensure that, especially issues that affect policy review? Like right now, I'm happy that I'm sitting in the task force that is reviewing the media policy in Kenya. We have that 15-member committee, and one of the stakeholders we've mapped, the people that we need to approach, are persons with disability, because some of those things that have been brought forward here, especially accessibility of information, most of them rely on third parties for information. And these are some of the things that I hope will be captured, especially in the Kenya media policy, considering that this policy review we are doing from 2009, we never had a new media policy. And so ensuring that special groups have their representations, that we actually go to them and we hear what they have to say, is quite something that I think is important. And it's through our own ways that we can be able to get their voices heard. So thank you very much, Jacqueline, for sharing that. And thank you. That was actually a fantastic program on KBC. I think you really made a very big difference for giving people with disabilities a voice. I think so many of us in Kenya remember what happened, and we can see how you didn't just look at them as, people who cannot help themselves. You looked at them as decision makers, as parents, as teachers, as doctors, as people who have worth in the society. And I think this is the picture we need to change, that we need to stop making them always victims who are helpless. But I think it's by celebrating them, looking at them as whole, looking at their contribution in the society, looking at the challenges they face, looking at the opportunities that they have. We look at them wholly. That is what ensures that they're included in every aspect of life, that we do not only include them in one aspect. We don't include them in one aspect of the needy or the victims, that we include them in all aspects, their contribution to the society, the economy, their contribution to politics. I think that is what is actually required of us. So thank you very much, Jacqueline, for that. I'll check what's, okay, this is John. I will be looking forward to more engagement. We can develop a model, unit curriculum, and sensitive other media training institutions. Yes, thank you very much, John, for that. I think this is a very good recommendation, and we said that this debate should not end here. And I hope Irene or Dara that are listening, and that we will have a follow-up where we can ensure that we continue this debate by actualizing some of the recommendations that have been made. I don't know if somebody else has a question. And we've not had, I've seen, we have, I think I'd seen some people from the committee. Thomas Buire, I just wanted to hear your comments, especially when you talk about the role of the community media in the society and ensuring that you're creating the spaces for, now a different subject. Although we are talking about people with disability, people within that group of people with disability, we also have other special groups. One of the ones we've heard about today, for example, is children who are intellectually challenged. And the question that we should be asking ourselves as the media, wherever we are, Judy at Amwick, whether it's Tom at Abari Kibra, whether it's Mikia, wherever you are, all of us, wherever we are, we should be asking ourselves, have we ever really reported on anything, especially when we talk about, children with intellectual challenges? And I think this is the question we need to start asking ourselves and start looking for ways of how can we come together as the media, as the civil society organizations, as the NGOs, as the government agencies. How can we come together and create a table of discussion where we can be able to air out these issues, look for challenges, and also at the same time discuss how then do we approach that. I think we really require, this voice is highly needed, because we keep on thinking that we've done a lot as the media, but the more we listen to different people, the more we realize that, we just touched, but we've not even gone where we are supposed to be. So I really think this is a very good discussion. Me too, I'm really challenged listening to what you are talking about. I'm really challenged, and I keep on asking, have I done it, or what should I do? I hope all of us are thinking in that way, and in whatever capacity that we are in, that will be able to support that discussion. Yes, Mikia, thanks, Jane, for sharing what the institution is doing on disability. All institutions ought to have this training in the curricula. Sorry, you meant, it's John who suggested that. I hope after this, Mikia, we are going to follow up and find out how they are doing, and that we can be able to share knowledge and even have a platform that the rest of us can attend. Chino, is your hand up?
Yes.
Yes, please.
I wanted to react to Mikia's report of the program that runs by 10 p.m. I wouldn't know who is the target audience of that program, like you have mentioned, programs that are meant to alleviate people's problems and burdens, especially people in the group of disability, are not meant to be aired late in the night, because by nature, they wear out easily. By 10, they must have gone asleep. Even if it's their caregivers, if you care for a disabled person, you will know that by 10 p.m., that person is supposed to catch up with rest. People who stretch till 10 p.m. are waiting for news. Any other program after news will not be catching up with the realities of education. So I think since you are close to policy making in your country, Madam Judie, I think it would be very well if you could see how you could work with some agencies, especially news agency, advertising agency, and see how they can include the disabled ones, even in some of their adverts, where they can play just minor roles. That would give them voice in the society. They even, when a child is watching an advert and see that somebody who is close to his or her health condition is being aired, it gives the person hope. I think that we should be practical enough in placing programs at the right time for the right people and give them participatory interest so that they would see themselves as part of the society rather than seeing themselves as people who are underestimated. I think I should stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chinwe. Actually, it's Mikia who raised that issue about one of the media houses bringing a late night program about people with disability. And actually, she was questioning who is being targeted and who is watching. At 10 p.m., who really wants to sit watching television? At 10 p.m., most of the people have already gone to sleep. So I believe this discussion that you've had is something that we need to continue. And I'm so happy that we have a representative, from Internews, from the different institutions. And I hope that one day or very soon that we can have a sitting where we can be able to talk about these issues. Internews, I have seen Fatma, you're here. And even the journalists who are here, including Awim, how do we even make it not just, of course, a Kenyan issue? How do we even plug in the rest of the country so that we can have a table where we can be able to discuss these things? And in discussing these things, we can ensure that there's media representation and especially targeting the decision makers in the newsroom, that they can hear from the voices of the groups that we are talking about, that they can hear their own complaints. And I always believe having a conversation where we bring subjects at the center of the story or the case studies at the center of the story so that they can hear it for themselves. That's when we make all the difference. And Jackline has already shared with us an experience that she had when she made a presentation before the Editors Guild in Naivasha here in Kenya. And actually she said they were shocked to hear about the challenges, they were facing. And so this is what we need to continue talking about, because I can tell you, had I not looked at the paper that had been done, especially children with intellectual challenges or with intellectual disabilities, I don't think I would have really thought about it. I would have just clustered them, they will just cluster so many groups and, persons with disability. And that's why I believe having these forums with the larger groups in the media and interesting them. We've heard about us thinking of how do we come up with an award, an annual award that recognizes the journalists who have been at the forefront, who have prioritized reporting about special groups, ensuring that they are included in every conversation that we are having in our countries. So those are some of the incentives I think we should be commissioning. We can have the story grants. We can also think about how do we even, support them, whether it is through training or knowledge transfer, so that they can also understand what we are talking about. I always believe it's about empowering the media. Journalists are very willing. I know of journalists who are really committed, who are passionate about bringing out issues that affect people. And some of them even have gone ahead to risk their lives. And I can tell you, were it not for the commitment of the journalists, dedication, we'll not be talking about gender representation. An area where we can talk about policy issues, about to that gender rule, like now in the Kenyan case. So I really salute the journalists who have been at the forefront. They have really done a lot of work, and I really want to appreciate them in a very big way. Although we are raising these issues, we are not raising them because we're discrediting what they are doing, but actually we are raising these issues because we want to see them to diversify, to cast their eye, higher, for them to be able to see those other stories that are not. So I think I'll hand over this session now to Odera. And Odera, one of the things that I'll request you is that let this not be the end of this conversation that you've started, but let's have an outcome where we are going to have a conference or whether it's a roundtable, whatever we are going to have. But I believe from what we've had, the engagement from the media, the engagement from the different representatives and the research papers that have been done, actually a lot. So how do we move this forward? So thank you very much, Sarah. Odera, are you here? Let me just read what's in the chat. Okay. And just because, of course, we finished early because we didn't have one of our presenters, one of our panelists didn't manage to come, but just allow me to talk a bit of where I work at the Association of Media Women in Kenya. And we are able to partner with... Let me mute, someone helps me to, okay. So we are able actually to convene a meet where we can be able to continue this discussion further. And I'm more than happy. I'm going to share my email shortly. And next year, I think we should be able to come together. I've seen interviews here as well. Nancy, you're here. Fatima, you're here. And the different players, we should be able to come up with something, even if we just come with something from our countries. And then later on, we can even team up together. And hopefully, like we are saying, we hope next year we can be able to have a physical meeting. Let us already start working within our countries. Hopefully, COVID will go away and we'll be able to resume our normal lives fully. So let us see what we can do as different countries in our own, countries. But then hopefully that later on in the year, next year, we can be able to convene and share the experiences, share the knowledge, and share, practical policies and laws that can be developed, and even the synergies and the networking that you can do with the media to ensure that these issues are highlighted. One of the things that I know in most countries, if we want action taken, if we want to be heard, you want the duty bearers to hear what you are talking about, the media really has to make a lot of noise about it. The media really has to amplify the voice. The media has to prioritize it. You have to see like a week that we have reports about inclusivity, especially about the special groups that we are talking about. So I think it's a chance for us, it's a challenge for us. And again, this is something we as the media have to start thinking about, children with intellectual disabilities, how are we covering them? What spaces are we giving them? What space are we giving the organizations that are supporting them? When we talk about also women with disabilities, yes, there are people with disability and there are women. And actually, being a woman with a disability, the challenges that already women face, this one even becomes even worse. So how do we ensure that we're able to highlight these issues and even push the duty bearers, push for a discourse and push the legislators to ensure that these things are supported? And again, the challenge that has been thrown to us, and this one is not an easy one. I'm thinking at a scenario where even able to meet the media owners to think about, yes, we have the sign language interpreters. What about those who require braille? About social media, how do we think about even diversifying to be creative, to design something that caters for the special people, for the people with the special needs? So it's been great honor to have listened to you, to have met you. I thank you so much also for being very active and participating in this group. I think all along I kept on checking my chat, and there was something that was being said or people are raising their hands to talk about it. And just before we end, let me read a message from Thomas. Oh, it's direct to me. Sorry, so I don't need to read it to everybody. Yes, Faith, no worries. Thanks for coming. That is what is very important. And we hope we'll loop you in when you're discussing the way forward in coverage of the special groups within the other bigger special groups. So thank you very much. It's been quite an engaging session. I hope that you've been able to exchange our contacts and that you're going to reach out to each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you.